Catapulting Commissions family, welcome back. I'm so excited. 2021 is kicking off, and I couldn't be more excited about this year's goals, this year's income, this year's revenue, and more importantly, this year's podcast guests. We have a phenomenal roster of guests lined up in 2021, New York Times bestsellers, former professional athletes, and bottom line, hardcore sales entrepreneurs that have taken their income, maximized it, duplicate it, and teach others to do so. So this year's show is going to be delivering some amazing content. And one of our first guests is Collin Mitchell. Now, let me tell you a little about Collin Mitchell. Collin is the founder of Monster VoIP. He's also the podcast host of the Sales Hustle. Now, Collin, from what I've gathered, is a serial entrepreneur. We were talking before we were recording. Such an incredible mindset, so much value. One of his mottos that he talks about in his business is shifting from always be closing to always be helping. And to hear that perspective from someone that has achieved the level of success as Collin is pretty interesting, and we're definitely going to dive into that. But just to give you some more of his accolades, he grew his business up $5 million, or grew his business to $5 million within 26 months. That's 2.5 years, guys. 2 years and 2 months to be exact. And so when you hear that growth, the ability to catapult your commissions at that level is what we talk about, is who we want on this show. So I'm excited to introduce Collin, and let's kick the show off. Collin, welcome to the Catapulting Commissions podcast.
Hey, that's an incredible intro there, Anthony. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Appreciate it. And I'm excited to just dive in and talk about some of the topics that your guests will find some value in.
Good, man. I appreciate it. But let's jump in here. Always be closing to always be helping. I got to be honest with you, man. I just saw Glenn Ross last week for maybe the 100th time flying back on a flight from Hawaii. It was one of the movies on United Airlines, and it literally was always be closing. I just laughed because that method, that philosophy is still spoke about today. And I mean, there's sales gurus out there who teach and coach always be closing, always be closing. You made a shift to always be helping, and it impacted your business. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So, I'm glad that you bring this up, and there's a lot of people that sit on different sides of the fence with this. So it's a controversial topic for sure. There is, like you said, a lot of people that still teach this always be closing mentality. And the fact is, in my experience and what I've seen in has been a big contributor to my success is that transition to always be helping, always be serving, and having a servant heart and a servant mindset where selling is serving. And when you're serving and helping, sales becomes so much easier. It's not like you're shoving deals down the pipeline that had no business being there in the first place. So yes, I'm not saying that you don't ask for the order. You got to ask for the order. However, if you are genuinely doing a good discovery process, if you are genuinely thinking about the person on the other side of the relationship and not just your commission check, you will be amazed at what actually happens. And the number one thing is when you really are going through that discovery process or those initial conversations as a seller, if you do a good enough job of thinking, can I actually, what I do as a business, whatever your product, whatever your service is, can that genuinely help this person to a better future state, a better desired state? Is there something in their business that's impactful enough that they're going to be willing to go along this journey of change? Because people don't like change. And if the answer is yes, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, a lot of wasted time on deals that you're trying to force to happen that had no business moving along in the first place. Also, buyers are smarter these days. Like I grew up in a sales environment where it was always be closing. And my sales training consisted of, here's the script, here's a list of names, here's a phone. Don't use the CRM because it doesn't work. And the script was a very traditional script. You know what I mean? Give them some warm intro, build a little bit of rapport, go into your offer. They don't buy, go into another offer. They don't buy, change the subject, warm them up, and then go in for another offer. And if they don't buy, then you better get a commitment for a future order. Like that was the script, you know? And it will take you so far. Like, I'm not saying you won't be successful with that, but you will be limited. You will be limited on how far you can go because you're just going to be constantly chasing that next commission check, that next rush, that next sale. And when you really, I'm a big believer in karma. And when you really are helping and serving, it comes back to you in a much bigger way than if you're forcing things to happen.
You know, I like what you said there. I too am a believer in karma, but this approach you're mentioning of like servant leadership or serving somebody, sales is service. And it is a controversial topic because there are two sides of the spectrum. My wife has a small business. We just had someone come try to sell us advertising, which was the always be closing. Everything that I would bring up, it was new offer. And with reality, right. Buyers are smarter. I had done a lot of research before he had shown up. I already kind of knew where my price points were, and I really was just fact finding. So there's the always be closing, which is a little bit aggressive, but the always be helping. There's one challenge I have with that when it's a sales is service, a servant leadership. Yes. And here's the struggle that I've experienced. And for those, you know, that are listening, I've been doing sales nearly for 20 years, business to consumer, business to business. And some of the last years has been in surgical sales and medical sales. The challenges are always there. No matter how much I want to serve,
yep,
I also have pressure to provide income. And the pressure to provide income is from family, is from money, is from rent, it's from mortgages, whatever the situation may be. So how do you maintain that focus of servant and when you're dealing with the pressures of finances, reality, life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so it's easy to feel that pressure and feel that you got to start shoving deals down the pipe to get there. But what's interesting, when you actually are serving others, you're actually serving yourself at a higher level as well. Because when you're genuinely only helping people that you can help, and sometimes that means not helping them, right? Which is hard to do, right? Especially if you think you can convince or persuade them to go and buy or whatever it is, whatever your product or service is. It takes discipline to realize this is not a good deal. This is not a good opportunity. And so what you do is you end up saving yourself a lot of time of chasing those deals that never would have closed anyway. So you're only focusing on very high quality deals. You have a very accurate pipeline. You know, a lot of people are always so caught up in trying to meet their activity quota, meet their call quota, meet their, you know, opportunity pipeline quota. You know, they're all, you know, really just trying to feel that pressure that I've got to do this many calls. I got to get this many meetings. I got to get this many deals in the pipeline. And what happens is they end up with 20, 30% of the deals in their pipe that they spend and waste time on that never should have been there in the first place. And if you really focus on helping and serving others and only working with the people that you genuinely can help, that actually see your value, that have something that's impactful to their business that you can help solve, you have a much more quality, a much more predictable pipeline, and it's much easier to know what you're going to make on that commission check and not feel so pressure. Because the reason that people feel that pressure is because they're unsure. They're not really sure how much of their pipeline is valid, is actually going to close.
I like that. I like that the discipline for deals, or the discipline to walk away from a deal, is a skill not everyone has. And the uncertainty you mentioned there at the end, it's very true. I know when I have been in positions of sales leadership and have gone with my reps on field rides or have gone and had a pipeline discussion, the more uncertainty or the more lack of clarity they have on their business, the more pressure they feel. So to hear you say that is pretty enlightening. Now, as I go through this process of working with sales professionals who want to plan their business and get clarity, let's talk about 2021 for a second here. If I'm listening to this podcast and I'm saying, okay, I want 2021 to be my biggest and most successful sales year, there's a lot of things that have changed, right? We're coming off a presidential election. Don't know the results yet. We're coming off COVID. Don't know the impact yet. We're coming off social distancing. Will it still be around? We don't know yet. So there's a lot of things that we can't control. So let's talk about what we can control. How does someone who has all their income driven from a career in sales make 2021 their best year? What planning processes would you recommend, or do you go through, and how can someone take some of that information from today's show and apply it?
Yeah. So there's a few things that come to mind, right? So number one, all the negative stuff, all of the excuses, all of the, these are real things, right? But they're things that can hold you back from being your best self to hit your goals, right? And so number one, before you can start setting goals, you got to take a little bit of inventory, right? What was working? What was not working? What are some new things that I can try? I'm the type of seller that if, the one thing as a seller, as a leader, or as an individual contributor, you always got to have an open mind and be willing to learn and try new things. That is one thing that is extremely important, because if you think that you figured it all out, that's when you're really in trouble, right? So number one, you got to take inventory of the things that are working, that are not working, or some things that you can try, new in 2021, whatever those are. I just had a conversation with somebody, and he's been in sales a lot. He's only been in sales a couple of years, like nowhere near as long as I have or you have. But I'm open to hearing what people have to say. And he said something interesting, and I said, hey, I'm going to try that. Right. So you got to have that sort of mindset. And I'll just to tell you what it was blind sending calendar invites. Somebody that's in your pipeline that you've been chasing down, that's warm, and then just assumptively sending them an invite for a time 4 or 5 days out on the calendar, and being, you got to nail the copy. You got to be like, hey, been trying to get a hold of you. It looks like it's been, hasn't been a good time. You said this was important because A, B, and C. I went ahead and put some time on the calendar. If that doesn't work, or you want to suggest a new time, just let me know. That sounds interesting. I'm willing to try that and see how it works, right? So that's an example. But to kind of get back to your question, right? So taking inventory, number one, what's working, what's not working, what you're willing to try, and then figure out what your goal is, your big lofty goal, whatever that is, your 5-year plan, your 2-year plan, your 1-year plan, and then you got to go backwards, right? So if you want to make X amount of dollars in commission for 2021, what is that? Like, you really got to drill it down. What does that mean per month? What does that mean per week? What does that mean per day? And break it down so you know what it is. And something that somebody told me not too long ago, and I feel like I knew it, but I just wasn't doing it, is write those down, not every day, but twice a day. Write them down. Your yearly goal, your monthly goal, your weekly goal, your daily goal. Write it down in the morning, write it down in the evening. Like, there's something, a lot of people, I'm a big fan of like a board, having it visual, looking at it, seeing it, but there's something about writing it down that really changes your relationship with really wanting to achieve that goal. And so, the thing is a lot of people have, because of the election, because of COVID, because people maybe didn't hit their numbers in 2020, they might have a little bit of a negative perception. They might they might be feeling a little bit down. You got to put that aside, because a lot of times being successful in sales in your professional life means that you got to do some work in your personal life first. You got to have some good habits. You got to be taking care of yourself personally to be your best self professionally. And whatever that looks like, if it's eating healthy, getting good sleep, meditating, having some sort of spiritual practice, having time off to recharge. Like, you got to you're like an athlete. An athlete takes very good care of themselves day to day personally, so that they can show up as their best self and perform on game day. And you got to view sales the same way.
I love that. It's hearing you say that is so profound, because I know in my world, I've recruited and have hired former collegiate and professional athletes, and we use that analogy. But I tell everyone, and I've said it on the show, and I've shared the story myself, you have to take those mental health days. You have to take that mental break. You have to say, I'm going to disconnect just for a little bit, because giving yourself, or giving 90% effort for 12 months is horrible, as opposed to giving yourself 100% effort for 11 months and taking 1 month off, or whatever the situation is. Now, I want to piggyback on some of the things you said here. You talked about, having 2021, taking inventory, what worked, what didn't work. Write down the goal, reverse engineer the goal, get clear. I like writing it down twice. That's actually the first time I've ever heard that. And I'm going to apply that, because I like, I have vision boards and screensavers on my phone and my computer and everything that tries to tell me. But to actually just write it down, I know when I write down goals, if I'm not on pace, it's like a gut check. Like, holy crap, dude, is this goal or is this a wish? Because if it's a goal and I'm behind pace, where am I at right now? And then we'll piggyback on that Outlook invite. I think that thing is genius. I've been doing something similar to that when I was actively in B2B, and I would Outlook invite so much so even a follow-up. If someone said, hey, you'll follow up, when do you want me to call you? Reach out to me in 2 weeks. Perfect, man. I'll reach, and I would put it on the calendar. And sometimes you'd get the phone call, hey man, it's not going to work. But you know what? They called me. Other times I'd call them and they'd be there like, hey, I was waiting for your call. You know, it's just utilizing technology. But Collin, you talked about reverse engineering the goal and breaking it down to what do you have to do week by week, month by month, day by day, so forth. When you're mentioning that, are you reverse engineering like the commission, the revenue, the activity? What exactly, when you tell someone to reverse engineer, are you having them do?
All of it and more, and go deep, right? So not just like, hey, I want to make $200,000. So that equals this per month, per week, per day, like deeper than that. What does it take to get you there, right? You got to know, as my good friend Ryan Rissert says, you got to know your math of sales, right? How many conversations do you have to how many calls do you have to make to get how many conversations are going to lead you to meetings, and what is your percentage of meetings to demo or meetings to opportunity, and what's your close rate? So you got to figure out all that. And then you got to, get not just your big number, because that's what happens a lot of times is when you don't go deep in breaking it down, it's very hard to not hit it, right? So maybe you have, I want to make $200,000 in commission, and you break that down to monthly, and then you break it down to weekly, and then you break it down to daily. And then you're not keeping track of, this day I hit it, this day I didn't hit it, this day I fell short, this day I overshot it. And then they're not recalibrating either. So that's one place where you can get in trouble. But you got to really break it down to all of your activities. What activities are going to lead you to getting the revenue or the commission that you want to, and sticking to that, right? So that looks like how many phone calls, or how many, networking, or how many people you need to meet, whatever that looks like, is going to lead you to how many meetings, to how many demos, how many opportunities, and then what's your close rate, and then breaking that down based on what your average sale is or your ACV.
I like that. When you're breaking it down and you're simplifying that activity, here's the amount of calls I need to make on a daily basis, or here's what I need to do on a weekly basis. You mentioned something about recalibrating. Do you have a method? When does someone recalibrate? If you're over a certain percentage of your goal, below a certain percentage of your goal, or do you go at it like, when's that incremental time to recalibrate? Because as I hear that, I think of a new sales rep saying, hey, let's just use simple math. My goal is to do $1.2 million a year in revenue. And in January, they do 200 grand. So they're like, oh, you know what? I don't have to do 100 grand a month because I'm already up 100 grand for the year, and I'm going to take a day off. I'm going to go golfing on Friday afternoon. I'm going to do whatever it is. When do you recalibrate?
Yeah. So that's a good question. And it really, I'm not a fan of like making the goal so big that it's like not achievable, and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to recalibrate, but making those little fine-tune adjustments of like, okay, this is my weekly goal, right? And I need to hit that on a weekly basis. And, based on what you hit on a daily basis, whether you hit underachieve or overachieve, recalibrating, but still to try to get to that weekly goal. Right. So it's really important when you pick your goal. If you're a new seller and say you made $100,000 last year for 2020, right? It's a little bit unrealistic to say I'm going to make 200, 300, 1,000. You gotta really be realistic when you pick that goal, and then break it down into, monthly, weekly, daily, but then also breaking down what activities you need to do in order to get there, and give yourself a little bit of a buffer.
Yeah, I agree. I think the realistic goal setting is more motivating than the unrealistic goal setting. And it's often, I struggle with this because you get new sales professionals that will say, "Hey, I'm going to go from 100 to 300,000," and then you get tenured sales professionals who are really good, who are like, "You know what? I'm going to go from 250. I'm gonna go to 255. I'm content. I'm happy. Like I don't know how to get to that next level, or I don't have the motivation to get to that next level, which I always believe it's who your sphere of influence, who's motivating you, who's
Yeah.
coaching you. And I like how you talked about taking care of yourself first. And part of when you say taking care of yourself first is part of who is influencing you. And that goes directly to who is going to keep you on track with realistic goal settings. For me, it's my wife. I come to my wife and my wife's a small business owner. She's been in sales, but when I say, "Hey, here's what I'm trying to accomplish," she looks at me like, "How?" And if I write it down, I break it down, and she's like, if she still looks at me like I'm crazy, I'm like, okay, there's some work I need to do here. Like, I haven't sold her.
Yeah.
And so
that's really funny because my wife is the same. So we started that first business together, right? And a lot of times, like, "Hey, I got this new idea. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And here's the goal." And she's like, "Okay, but what did you do last month? What did you do last quarter? So why do you think that you're going to do that?" I'm like, "Okay, maybe we can scale it back just a little bit."
we are our best promoters when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah. She told me the other day, she's like, "Man, sometimes it's exhausting being married to a salesperson because I got to sift through your bullshit sometimes."
That
but
sounds
you know what?
funny.
All right, but here's one thing that you said that I think is really important, and I want to touch on a little bit deeper, right? So part of your who's your influence, right? Who's motivating you, but also what are you taking in, right? Like, are you hanging out with the sellers in your organization that are always complaining about management, talking about how this and that is not fair, and they always have excuses and they're never hitting goal? Or are you surrounding yourself with winners? Are you surrounding yourself with people in both your professional and your personal life that are positive, that have alignment, that are motivated, that are gonna not only just root you on but also call you out on your crap, right? Like people that are going to keep you accountable. So, and also, what are you consuming, right? Are you watching the news all day? It's going to be hard to stay positive if you're just sitting around watching the news all day.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I'm glad you touched on that. And we hear it often. Like, who do you surround yourself with in your sales company, in your sales environment? And I go and I tell people, like, hey, your perception's your reality. So if you sit around people who are like, "Hey, this comp plan sucks, this quota sucks, blah blah blah," and you spend more time looking up the next sales job, the next sales comp plan, as opposed to learning how to master your own, then that's your reality. And I think a lot of that goes to the surrounding environments, who's there, but it's one of the things that nobody really likes to talk about and admit. There's adversity in sales. Point blank, bottom line. We're told no more than we're told yes. Yep. On the labor board, according to U.S. Labor Board statistics, sales professionals churn over, essentially 1 out of 3 sales professionals churn over every year. And millennial sales professionals, if you're a millennial or you manage a sales team of millennials, chances are 51% of millennial sales professionals within the first 2 years of one sales job have already interviewed for the next sales job with a different company, because they're always looking for that instant gratification, that instant fix, looking for something. So I like how you say to who's influencing you, who's surrounding you. How do you build that in your own business, your own life? I mean, do you just go to somebody and say, "Hey man, I like you, I want to be close to you," or do you just try to provide value? I mean, how does that conversation start as a new person to get surrounded by, some of the high flyers?
Yeah. So I will push back on one thing. I would venture to say that some of those people you're talking about, they are not sales professionals. They might have a selling job, but I wouldn't consider them sales professionals. So what you'd want to do is you want to surround yourself with real sales professionals, people that, love the craft, people that are always open to getting better, people that are, going to provide you good feedback, people that are going to call you out on stuff, people that are willing to help, people that are positive, right? So if you have people that are not positive in your life, whether that, and you know what, this is a personal thing, you got to really, consider some things. Sometimes that might be family. You got somebody in your family that you're hanging around that's just always negative, always talking crap, always, complaining, you might want to limit the amount of time you spend around those people, and it all depends. How far do you want to go? Is that 200, is that 100 a year, 200 a year, 250? Is that what you're comfortable with? Or do you want to go further? And if you want to go further, you got to take a lot of things really seriously. And one part of that is taking care of yourself personally, surrounding yourself with the right people, and making sure that you're in a good mindset to be your best self when you show up to sell.
I love that, man. Absolutely agree with that 100%. Family sometimes can be they're the hardest people to recognize when they have a negative impact. Fun fact, my mother retired after a long career of state service and became a real estate agent. Last year was her first year, and 2019 was her first year, and I think she 2 or 3 homes, and she only worked like 6 months of the year, and was getting some negative pushback from family, and like, why are you doing this? The real estate industry is brutal. My mom is, she's a typical like loving mother, doesn't have an aggressive killer bone in her body, but was getting pushback from family. We're saying, you're not going to be successful if you're not going to get hungry, if you're not going to be rude, if you're not going to be ruthless. And she called me and she shared that with me, and I lost it. I was like, Mom, who said this? She shared with name, it was a family member. I'm like, first of all, I very rarely do this. I'm like, Mom, you could tell that family member I have lost more in sales than they have sold in their whole life. And I completely disagree with how they're saying. I was so defensive because they were impacting my mom. And I was like, no, Mom, me and you are going to talk on a weekly basis. I'm going to coach you. Not I'm going to give you the skills. It's just a mindset, Mom. Embrace who you are. Own it. I'm so pumped. My mom called me yesterday. 2020 was her greatest year ever. She has one more deal to close, which will be like her 13th deal for the year, which I told her, she's like, there's people doing 20, 30, 40. I'm like, Mom, you went from 3 to 13. Like, then that's massive. Yeah. That is a massive growth
in a tough market.
Absolutely. So yeah, that family thing of who's influencing you is huge. And I acknowledge that pushback. There's sales professionals, there's people who work a job in sales that don't fully understand, this is a constant education. I mean, one of my selfish plugs with the podcast is I meet such amazing guests like yourself, and we have dialogue and we have feedback, and I always take something, and I've had people challenge my thoughts or my beliefs, and I'm never like defensive, like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm like, where did that come from? Like, I'm open to change. I'm open to learning. I embrace some of the not some of them. I embrace all the failures that come because it's always an opportunity to learn. So I dig what you're saying there, my man.
Yeah. And that's, my good friend Jason Cutter wrote a book, Authentic Persuasion. And he says the difference is order takers and quota breakers. That's the difference between somebody in sales and a real sales professional, in my opinion, right? So there's a place for order takers. Order takers are okay if it's a commoditized business, and it's more of a customer service driven type of role. Quota breakers are fine. They're typically very people-pleasing people, but quota breakers are people that are willing to push the limits, the people that are willing to, go deep in that discovery and understand their value. When you're serving, when you're selling is serving for you, you understand your own value, and you're only willing to go along the sales journey with people that you feel appreciate it. And actually need the help, and you're willing to push back to get them to go along that journey with you. And that's a big difference.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love that. There's sales, order takers, and quota breakers. I'm going to use that, and I'm gonna get that book, Authentic Persuasion, because I'm definitely going to steal from the best with pride. I'm going to share that with my team because there's truth. There's so much truth and so much value there. But let's talk about the quota breakers, right? People making that transition. And in this always be helping method we discussed, the sales is service. What's the one mistake like in their sales process that you see people break down? Like, where's the chink in their armor where, hey, here's where you're messing up. Here's where you're losing the I always want to be helping versus I want to be over closing. Like, what's that fine line where people typically fail or falter?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's the discovery. The discovery makes and breaks people. Because a good, deep discovery, that they need your help, or they don't. And if they don't, you need to disqualify them early, right? which is going to save you a lot of time that you're going to waste. Because this is where a lot of people fall short, right? Maybe somebody comes in, it's an inbound lead, it's an outbound lead. They're like, yeah, we're looking into this. This is great timing. And they're like, woohoo, I'm going to get this sale, right? But they don't go deep on the discovery to qualify them properly. And then maybe they had good rapport, they're jiving, they like the same sports team, and they're like, oh yeah, this guy's ordering for sure. There's no chance he's going anywhere. He's going with us, right? But they didn't do a proper discovery, and they're thinking just because they like them or they built rapport, that's a good qualified opportunity in their pipe. And that's wrong. Like people, yes, people buy from people. So, if you're likable, that helps. But that is not the reason why they're going to buy from you. They're going to buy from you if you can help them, if you can solve something, if you can take them to a better future, state, whatever that is, through your product and service is the vehicle to getting them there. That's why people buy from you. So if you don't do a good, proper discovery, you're going to have a pipeline that is very uncertain and not very predictable. And you're not going to know what are your good prospects, your good quality, qualified prospects versus ones that aren't, and they're in there just because, maybe you jived with them. So the discovery is key because that's going to keep a good, healthy pipe. You're going to know that the people in there are highly qualified to be there, and you can spend the time and the energy to get them to go along that journey with you. So there's huge advantages to doing a good quality discovery, and it helps you along the sales process, right? Everything that you do after the discovery or the qualification call, whatever you want to call it, everything you do in that call is important because you're framing everything after that based on that conversation. Because people forget things. You're going to need to remind them why they're doing this because people don't like to change. And that's based on you doing a good, deep discovery, understanding not just the problem, but the impact, how that impacts them personally, professionally, their department, their company as a whole, and being able to use that as the driver to keep them moving forward.
Yeah, I dig that. The discovery process, and everyone has a different name for it, right? But essentially that does set it up. And to hear you say that's where people make mistake, I think about early part of my career where I would say if, we've heard before, people buy stuff from people they like, and trust. If someone likes me and trusts me, they're going to buy my product. And it's like a false sense of confidence as a sales rep that you've done a good job. When in reality, you're just no different. You're no different than the person they get coffee from, who waves and says hi, has a good conversation. Did you see the game last night? I mean, there's nothing different between you and that person. So to hear that, I like. When you're doing a discovery and you identify a problem, how do you try to quantify that problem for your prospects?
Definitely. Yeah. Like what is that? How does that problem impact your business or your department or you personally? Is it holding them back from hitting a bigger overarching goal? Is it, wasting a lot of time in their particular department? Is it causing frustration because whatever solution that they have that's similar to yours isn't working, right? Like what is it, there's two things that are most important to everybody, right? Their time and their money, right? So how is it impacting those things? And what does it mean? Not just what does it mean, right? How is it impacting, but what does it mean to them if they don't solve it, if they don't fix it, if they do nothing? And getting them to let you know what that is so you can remind them, hey, if we don't do this, remember, this is what we discussed.
Yeah, the time and money thing and quantifying that. As I've evolved in my career in sales, and I started direct to consumer with direct sales organization, spent almost 4.5 years in B2B, and have now been in surgical sales and contract negotiations. That really never changes, right? Time, money. Can I save you time? Can I save you money? Can I quantify the problem? From simple as, and I share, with pride, I started selling Cutco cutlery a long time ago, right? Can my knife help you? And can it make it more comfortable and easy for you? And then, I started working in payroll services, and I started in the medical field. Can this change the way you do your practice? Can this make life easier? And so when we get bigger deals, and in the world of B2B, right, as you start to get these bigger deals, that discovery process, I found that people get nervous. People forget the fundamentals because it might be the biggest deal. It might be the one that's going to hit your quota for the year. And you forget all the fundamentals and you try to become a salesperson instead of being a sales servant. Do you see that at all? Do you hear that at all? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So lots of people, actually most people, I'll just be honest, most people suck at discovery. Most people do. Especially if it's an inbound lead. They're like, hey, they came to us. They want what we have. So they go straight to features and benefits, right? We're going to save you this amount of money. We're going to solve this for you. We have this and that and this and that. And they don't care about any of that, right? Sometimes they just want the simple version of like, how is this going to help me? How is this going to solve the current problem? So, even on our, like, for example, just to give you an example, even on our inbound, one of our inbound forms that we use, it's like, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, we want to know that up front right away, because we're going to frame the conversation around that. And, frankly, if price is the only thing, those deals don't spend a lot of time on. Now, I'm not saying don't take them. I'm not saying don't put them in the pipe. I'm not saying don't move forward with them, because sometimes price is, it's painful enough where like they really need to save money if the deal's big enough, and the savings that you're providing them is maybe, impactful enough to help, improve their margins as a business or whatever the case is. But price is not the best motivator. Price is important, but, price is not the, it's typically, you got to be solving something for them. Those are bigger motivators than price. People will pay more for a product or service if they value whatever it is that you're solving for them. People will pay more for your product and service if they feel like you're the best fit. You're going to provide the most value. You're going to solve that problem better than other people for them. I experienced this just the other day. I had a call with a prospect, and, I still, being a founder, like, I still actively sell because I love it. I just love it. I cold call at least 2 to 3 times a week. I do, because I enjoy it. And so I was on a call with a prospect the other day, and she had already looked at 3 other options, and we were about, I think, 30% more, but she was going with us because we went deep on the discovery, and because she felt that we were going to be the best suited to solve their problem.
I love that. You saying that and hearing that goes to show that price isn't always the answer, and just solving a problem and having that confidence that you can solve a problem is key. I mentioned my wife's business earlier. When we hired an architect to draw the designs. She owns an eyelash studio here in Bakersfield where we live. And when we hired an architect, we interviewed 3 architects. We ended up hiring the one that was the most expensive because they created the best plan and they identified all the problems, all the concerns. The other guy's like, I can do everything she said. The lower man said, I can do everything that the bigger guy's doing for you, but didn't spend the time to really make me feel comfortable that he could solve that problem. And hearing the inbound leads mess up, it's funny. I don't know if you know anybody who sells timeshares, right? Like the timeshare salespeople. But I have a guy that sells timeshares in Cabo San Lucas in Mexico. He sold me my timeshare. I ended up being his 2nd or 3rd sales. Mm-hmm. And this is, 5-6 years ago. And I go back every year because I love the place. And I've developed a friendship with this guy. We've gone deep sea fishing and share with him my book, and he will ask questions. And one of the things that he said that really changed his closing percentage and changed it is he tells people straight up, hey, are you here to learn about the property resort, or are you here to get the free fishing trip or the free massage that was promised you by the front? And he says, when people say, hey, I'm here for the free, from the free stuff, he says, okay, he says, look, in order for you and me to have a dialogue that is meaningful, we have to spend 90 minutes together per whatever the agreement is. If you want me to just rush through it and so we can get to the end, I can do that. Or if you really want to hear things out, let me know, and it'll spend a little bit more time. But by simply saying that up front and just getting it all on the cards, yeah, I loved hearing him say, he's like, my closing percentage is 10 times higher, because people who are genuinely interested just say, hey man, I am. And people who are there for, to not really waste that are there for like the freebie, I know it, I run through it, and they are the ones that turn around and start saying, well, hey, you didn't tell me about this, you didn't tell me about that. And so he kind of takes that decision away, but sets a huge discovery. So I love hearing you say that from inbound.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing, right? So if some it's whatever your product or service, let's say if it's B2B, right, and price is the only thing, I'm not saying don't take those deals, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, if you can save them money, great. Don't spend a lot of time on those deals. Give them what they need, give them the price, and move on. Almost like they're not even part of the qualified pipe, right? So you have, if you have a CRM, which you should be able to identify like, hey, the probability of what's in your pipe. The ones that are price motivated only should have a very low probability in your pipe. The ones that you went deep in discovery, they have a problem, you can solve it, you're best suited, those are a higher probability. Those are the high qualified ones that you're going to want to, go the extra mile, do a video, get personal, spend a lot of time with them. Those are the deals that are, more important and have a much higher likelihood of closing.
Yeah, oh, man, I love it, dude. I can pick your brain and talk this stuff all day long, because when you move people between hot, warm, and what you do, and to who's ready to buy, who's not ready to buy, where you spend your time. I mean, we talk about saving time and money for our prospects, but as a sales professional, our time is our most valuable resource. So if I'm going to spend my time with somebody who's not going to move the needle, dude, I'm just gonna go bananas on that. All right, man, we're wrapping up here. We're finishing this interview here shortly, but I gotta pick your brain on a few more things here before we finish up. Collin, what is the number one? And this is something that I'm starting to get my guests to discuss and open. What's the biggest sales mistake you've made in your career that really transitioned and changed the way you do business? I think I have an idea, but let's just talk it up a little.
All right. So biggest mistake is there's two things. One is, well, they're both in discovery, of doing a crappy discovery job. And there's two deals that I remember. And, sometimes, I'm stubborn, like a lot of salespeople. And sometimes, you and I can talk here for hours and tell people that do this and don't do that. And there's a lot of people that are still going to do the exact opposite until they experience it firsthand. And that's okay. Hopefully it's not too costly, right? So let me give you these examples. So discovery, not making sure that you have all of the proper stakeholders to make the decision on the deal from the beginning. And this is hard for a lot of people because they think, oh, they're an influencer. We had a great conversation. They like me. But are they going to be a good champion when the decision maker is involved to decide, right? Or are you just another name on a piece of paper with a number, right? So you got to make sure you have all the proper stakeholders. I lost a deal that was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars because I didn't make sure that I had the proper stakeholders involved from the very beginning. Now, and I've also made other mistakes in the discovery process where I didn't go deep on finding the problem. And, it was strictly on price and, thought that the deal had legs and it should have never been in the pipe in the first place. So it all falls back to discovery. There's tons of things and mistakes that you can make in discovery. And sometimes you're not going to do discovery differently, or you're not going to take discovery seriously until it affects your wallet and you feel it and it's painful.
Dude, I love that, because we are stubborn. And I think about some of the greatest lessons I've made. I've had to make them myself because, a younger 20-something version of myself was like, oh, I can do it better. And then you make the same mistake someone told you not to avoid, but you've learned the lesson. So if you're that person, it happens. But I will tell you this, as I've gotten older and as I started listening and collaborating, working with people like yourself, and I have an executive coach now, and I've shortened so many learning curves and so many mistakes. So to hear your mistakes, the discovery is key. Shallow in identifying the problem is always going to be an issue. And that problem, that stakeholder identification, the decision maker identification, oh man, it's difficult. It's almost nerve-wracking because you feel like I spent time with somebody, and then when you realize they're not the stakeholder, they're not the decision maker, it's a hard conversation to go back to your sales manager and be like, hey, I spent all these resources and I haven't met the right person yet.
Yeah. And another one is not having a good upfront contract, right? You know, that's really key. And most people don't even know what that means. Like, you got to be willing to say, hey, Anthony, at any point in time on this journey that we go along together, because I understand change is uncomfortable. If you decide it's not a right fit for you, or that we're not the best option, I'm a big boy. You know, let me know. You're not going to hurt my feelings, because people don't like telling people no, and people don't like conflict. So you might have good rapport. They might have got their budget slashed. They might be concerned for whatever reason. They might be, you know, they might be a little confused about something. You just got to let them know, hey, at any point, this doesn't look like a fit. Let me know. I'm okay with that, because there's lots of people that could use my help, and I'd rather focus my energy on those who actually, you know, need it at this time.
Dude, I like that. That accountability you set by having the correct contract up front is probably the reason you've been successful as you have been, because you really do hold people accountable to doing what they say they're going to do. And you give somebody an out. Like, hey, if I can't hold the end of the bargain, I'm just going to tell you now. So,
yeah.
So I like that. Dude, Collin, how do people learn more about you? How do people learn more about the sales hustle? Where can someone connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is really the best spot. I'm super active on LinkedIn. I'm on other social media as well, but LinkedIn is definitely my playground. You know, 80-90% of my time of social media is on there. And then they can check out my podcast, which is on all the platforms, called Sales Hustle. And yeah, those are really the best two spots to connect, to find out more about what I'm doing.
Awesome, buddy. Well, I appreciate your time today, Collin. I think, with all honesty, man, you're being one of my first guests in 2021, dude. You have set the bar high for the Catapulting Commissions podcast. So thank you for joining today. Catapulting Commissions family, dude, go connect with Collin, Sales Hustle. You'll find all those links in the show notes. If you're listening to the podcast, if you're watching the YouTube video, it'll be in the comments and the links below. And always be sure to subscribe, leave us a comment. We love hearing the feedback. Collin likes hearing the feedback. And I will see you guys next week. Thanks again.